All right, so you brought us some pretty fascinating documents for today's deep dive. And it looks like we're going right into the JFK assassination.
Mm-hmm.
But not the same old stories this time.
Right.
These documents focus on Lee Harvey Oswald
Okay.
in the weeks leading up to November 63.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you, there are some seriously strange twists and turns in here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And what's particularly interesting, I think, is the source material itself.
Okay.
We're not dealing with the typical news clippings or government reports.
Yeah.
We're diving into excerpts from the fourth decade,
I've heard of
a
that.
journal that's completely dedicated to JFK assassination research.
Yeah?
It's just packed with firsthand accounts and those lesser-known details that you just won't find in your standard history books.
Okay, so we're really going beyond the usual headlines here.
Yeah.
What's the most intriguing thread that you found in all this?
Well, it involves a woman named Laura Kittrell.
Okay.
She was an employment counselor in Dallas back in 1963. Right.
And get this, she documented 2 encounters with men,
What?
claiming to be Lee Harvey Oswald in October of that year.
Okay, so this is just weeks before the assassination.
Just weeks before, yeah.
Oh, hold on. 2 encounters.
2.
So she met an Oswald imposter.
Yeah.
This isn't some, conspiracy theory. It's coming straight from her documented experiences.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it's not just about, the dates and times of these meetings.
Right.
Kittrell's account goes deeper,
Yeah.
capturing the feeling in the room, the unease she experienced during these encounters.
Gotcha.
It really paints a vivid picture.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit.
Okay.
What was Oswald like in that first meeting on October 10th?
Kittrell describes him as surprisingly calm, relaxed, almost jovial.
Really?
This is a man supposedly in dire financial straits.
Yeah.
Yet he doesn't seem too worried.
Okay.
He even makes this weird comment about her father having a lot of dough, which is, well, a strange thing to say to an employment counselor. Oh, yeah. That's definitely a red flag.
Right.
Anything else unusual during that meeting?
There's this unsettling exchange where Oswald brings up Murray Chotiner.
Okay.
Do you know who that is?
Vaguely I know the name.
He was a political advisor to Richard Nixon.
Oh, wow.
It suggests that Oswald was at least somewhat aware of, political figures and backroom dealings.
Right.
Which might not fit the typical image people have of him.
Yeah, definitely not your average job seeker conversation.
No.
And then he goes on to talk about speaking Russian, being married to a Russian woman,
Right.
working in a factory in Minsk.
And this is where the contradictions start to pile up.
Okay.
He's presenting himself as a defector,
Right.
but he was given a factory job in the Soviet Union.
That doesn't track.
Doesn't quite track.
And then there's his intense focus on getting a white-collar job downtown, even insisting on taking aptitude tests.
Yeah.
When he desperately needs to start working immediately.
Right.
It's like he's trying to fit a certain profile,
Yeah.
like playing a part.
Almost.
Okay, so now let's go to the second encounter,
All right.
which happened on October 21st. This was just one day after Marina Oswald gave birth to their second daughter, right?
That's right. And this time, a different man shows up claiming to be Oswald.
Wow.
Kittrell immediately senses that something's off.
Really?
This guy's just different.
This imposter element throws a real wrench into everything.
It does.
I mean, could Kittrell be mistaken?
It's tough to say,
What would even be the motive
Right.
behind someone impersonating Oswald at that time?
That's the great question, and it's one that continues to baffle researchers.
Really?
Kittrell was a seasoned professional.
Right.
She knew how to read people, and she was adamant that this was a different person.
Okay, but as for the motive,
Yeah.
well, we'll get into that, I guess, a bit later.
Let's get into that later.
But for now, let's focus on what this second Oswald had to say.
Okay, so this imposter, what kind of story was he spinning?
He claimed to have joined the Teamsters Union.
Teamsters.
But here's the kicker.
Yeah.
He didn't have a driver's license.
No.
Or even a union card.
No, you have to understand.
Yeah.
The Teamsters in the 60s
Right.
were incredibly powerful. They controlled a lot of the, transportation and logistics in the country.
Right.
To claim membership without even a driver's license is highly suspicious.
Yeah.
Like trying to claim you're a chef without knowing how to use a stove.
Wow. So we have 2 men, both claiming to be Oswald. One, a blatant imposter.
Right.
This is already mind-boggling, but it gets crazier. Right.
Yeah.
Because years later, Kittrell actually identified this imposter
She did?
from Warren Commission photos.
From photos.
Yeah.
She discovers that the man who pretended to be Oswald was Curtis Laverne Larry Cryford.
Okay.
And get this, he was Jack Ruby's assistant at the Carousel Club.
Whoa. This is where things start to feel like a spy thriller.
It does, doesn't it?
Could Ruby have been involved in something even before the assassination?
It certainly raises a lot of questions.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what exactly was going on in Dallas during those weeks leading up to the assassination.
Right.
We have this strange connection between a supposed lone wolf assassin and the man who would ultimately silence him. It's a connection that deserves further scrutiny.
Absolutely. So who was this Cryford character?
Okay.
What do we know about him?
Well, he was a young man, just 22 years old at the time.
Okay.
He had a bit of a drifter background,
Okay.
working carnivals, doing odd jobs, that sort of thing.
Right.
He met Ruby at the State Fair in Dallas.
Okay.
And was hired to do odd jobs at the Carousel Club.
So picture it a smoky nightclub. Loud music.
Yeah.
Shady characters.
All of that.
And Ruby himself, a larger-than-life personality.
Right.
Prone to sudden bursts of anger.
Yeah.
It's a setting ripe for intrigue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now we have to ask, why was Cryford impersonating Oswald at the employment office?
Right.
What was the point of this charade?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Was it a prank?
Right.
A test? Or something more sinister? It's hard to say for sure. But one thing's clear.
What's that?
This wasn't just some random act.
You're saying this impersonation was deliberate?
Yeah.
That there was a purpose behind it?
The source material suggests exactly that. It speculates that Cryford was testing his ability to impersonate Oswald.
Right.
Possibly for some, nefarious purpose down the line.
Oh, wow.
And when you consider that Ruby later shot Oswald,
Yeah.
it makes Cryford's impersonation even more suspicious.
That's a chilling thought.
Yeah.
But is there any evidence to support that?
Well,
could it have been, something more mundane?
Right.
Like a prank gone wrong?
It's possible, but unlikely given the circumstances.
Okay.
Think about it. Cryford goes to the effort of learning about Oswald's background.
He even uses some of the same details
Okay.
that the real Oswald provided during his first visit.
Oh, really?
It seems like more than just a casual prank.
Yeah. Okay. But even if it wasn't a prank,
Right.
what would be the point of impersonating Oswald at the employment office? It doesn't seem like the most strategic move if you're planning an assassination.
That's true. But we have to remember
Yeah.
that we're dealing with a very complex and murky situation here.
Okay.
It's possible that the impersonation was part of a larger plan.
Okay.
A way to establish a false trail or to create confusion in the aftermath of the assassination.
So you're saying it could have been a way to frame Oswald?
Yeah.
To make him look guilty?
Yeah.
Even before the assassination took place?
It's a theory that some researchers have explored.
Really?
The idea is that by having someone impersonate Oswald in various settings, you could create the impression that he was involved in activities that he wasn't actually part of. It's a way to build a case against him without his knowledge.
Okay. That's a pretty disturbing thought.
It is.
It makes you wonder if Oswald himself was aware of any of this.
Right.
If he knew that someone was out there impersonating him.
It's a question that's likely to remain unanswered.
Yeah, probably.
But there's another intriguing piece of this puzzle that we need to consider.
Okay.
The source material raises the possibility
Okay.
that Oswald and Cryford might have actually known each other.
Wait, really? How could that be?
There's witness testimony placing Oswald at the Carousel Club during November 1963.
So just weeks before the assassination.
Just weeks before, yeah.
If true, it means that Oswald was potentially moving in the same circles as Cryford and Ruby.
Exactly.
This detail is really making me reconsider Oswald's connections. It seems like a quiet suburban street was suddenly at the heart of this intrigue.
Yeah.
Didn't Oswald's friend Ruth Payne live in Irving, Texas at the time? The same town where Marina and the kids were staying.
That's right, and that's where things get even more tangled.
Oh, boy.
It turns out that several people connected to Jack Ruby were also living in Irving.
Wow.
During that same period of time.
Hold on. You're saying there were people from Ruby's world living in close proximity to Oswald's family? That seems like more than just a coincidence.
It's a cluster of connections that's hard to ignore.
Yeah.
For example, Bill Simmons, the piano player from the Carousel Club, lived just a few doors down from the Paynes.
Wow, just a few doors down?
Few doors down, yeah.
And what about Crafford? Was he living nearby too?
Crafford was actually living at the Carousel Club itself during this time.
All right.
But another Carousel Club musician, the drummer Billy Joe Willis, lived directly across the street from Ruth Paine.
So to recap, we have Oswald's wife and children living with Ruth Paine.
Yes.
And right across the street is a guy who works for Jack Ruby. It's like everyone's suddenly living in the same neighborhood.
Exactly. And it gets even more intriguing. This same drummer, Willis, had seen Oswald at the Carousel Club and even witnessed a confrontation between Oswald and the club's emcee.
Wait a minute. Oswald was getting into fights at a strip club.
Apparently so.
That doesn't fit the image of the quiet, bookish type.
Right.
That's often portrayed.
It definitely adds another layer of complexity to Oswald's character, doesn't it?
Right. And it makes you wonder what he was doing at the Carousel Club in the first place.
Exactly.
Was it just a random night out?
Yeah.
Or was there a deeper purpose behind his presence there?
Right.
Okay, let's step back and look at the bigger picture here.
All right.
We've got Oswald and his imposter connections to the Carousel Club.
Yeah.
And now this strange cluster of people living in close proximity in Irving.
Right.
What are we supposed to make of all this?
It's clear that there's more to this story than meets the eye. These connections, the timing, the impersonation, it all suggests that Oswald was potentially entangled in something much larger than himself. Whether he was a willing participant or an unwitting pawn is a question that continues to be debated.
It's almost like a puzzle with missing pieces.
It is.
We have these fragments of information, these tantalizing clues, but it's hard to see the full picture.
Exactly. And that's the challenge for researchers and historians. We have to piece together these fragments, analyze the evidence, and try to make sense of it all.
But if Oswald was somehow caught up in a larger scheme, what was the nature of that scheme? And who was pulling the strings?
Those are the ultimate questions, aren't they?
Yeah, I guess so.
And unfortunately, there are no easy answers.
Right.
But as we continue our deep dive into these documents, we'll explore some of the theories and possibilities that have emerged over the years.
Speaking of those theories, there's one detail from Oswald's employment office visit that's been bugging me.
Okay, what's that?
He seemed particularly distraught.
Oh, yeah.
About receiving an undesirable discharge from the Marines.
Ah, yes. That's a detail that's often overlooked, but it could be significant. Kittrell notes that Oswald appeared sad and ashamed, claiming he received the undesirable discharge because he wasn't willing to submit to authority.
It's a curious statement, isn't it?
Yeah.
Was he genuinely rebellious, or was there something more to this discharge?
Well, what's interesting is that Oswald was actually initially given an honorable discharge in September 1959.
So the change to undesirable happened later?
It didn't happen until January 1962.
Oh, wow.
After he had defected to the Soviet Union and made some anti-American statements to the press.
So it was a retroactive punishment, basically.
It was,
But why blow up years later during a job interview?
That's the question, isn't it?
Right.
Some researchers believe that Oswald's defection and subsequent undesirable discharge could have made him a target for recruitment.
For recruitment by
intelligence agencies.
Oh, you're saying they might have seen him as potential asset? Someone they could manipulate or control?
It's a possibility. Oswald's background, his knowledge of Russian, his apparent disillusionment with America, it could have made him a prime candidate.
For what?
For certain covert operations.
And if that was the case, could his undesirable discharge have been used as leverage against him?
It's certainly a theory worth considering. Intelligence agencies often operate in a world of shadows where manipulation and coercion are not uncommon.
It's a chilling thought to think that Oswald might have been caught up in a web of intrigue that he couldn't escape.
Exactly.
And it makes you wonder if he was indeed involved in some kind of intelligence operation. What was the nature of that operation?
Was it connected to the assassination in any way?
Those are questions that researchers continue to grapple with decades later. But by examining details like his military record, his defection, his connections to figures like Crawford and Ruby, we can start to piece together a more nuanced understanding of Oswald and his potential role in the events leading up to the assassination.
Okay, we've just touched on the possibility that Oswald might have been involved in some kind of intelligence operation. And I know this is a topic that gets a lot of people fired up with all the conspiracy theories out there.
Right.
But let's stick to the facts and see if there's anything in these documents to support this idea. What else can we find in these sources that might shed some light on Oswald's potential involvement with intelligence agencies?
Well, one event that's always been shrouded in mystery is Oswald's trip to Mexico City. Right. The Mexico City trip.
Just weeks before the assassination.
He supposedly visited the Cuban and Soviet embassies there.
He did.
I remember reading about that.
Yeah.
But the details were always a bit murky.
Exactly. According to official records, Oswald arrived in Mexico City on September 26, 1963, and spent several days there before returning to the United States. He allegedly visited both the Cuban and Soviet embassies, seeking visas or assistance.
But you said the details are murky.
Yeah.
What's the issue with the official story?
There are discrepancies in the accounts, conflicting witness statements, and even missing documentation. For instance, some people who supposedly interacted with Oswald during that trip later claim they couldn't identify him or that the person they met didn't match his description.
Wait, so are you saying there might have been another imposter at play here?
It's a possibility that some researchers have explored. They argue that the Mexico City trip was staged with someone else impersonating Oswald to create a false trail linking him to communist countries.
But why go to all that trouble? What would be the point of staging this whole elaborate charade?
If this theory holds water, the point would be to solidify Oswald as a dangerous communist sympathizer in the public eye.
Right.
It would preemptively paint him as the sole perpetrator of a heinous act. Someone capable of assassinating the president.
Okay, but that's a pretty bold claim.
It is.
Is there anything in the source material to back up this idea of a staged trip?
There's a lot of circumstantial evidence and inconsistencies that have fueled these theories.
Okay, like what?
For example, there are reports of intercepted phone calls that don't quite match up and suspicious photographs that some believe don't actually depict Oswald.
Oh, wow. So I've got conflicting accounts, missing documents, and potentially doctored photographs.
Right.
Certainly enough to raise some eyebrows.
Absolutely. And we can't forget the geopolitical context of the time.
Right.
The Cold War was at its peak, and tensions between the U.S. and the Soviet Union were incredibly high.
So a lone gunman with communist ties would fit perfectly into that narrative, wouldn't it?
It certainly would.
Yeah.
And that's why some researchers believe that Oswald's alleged trip to Mexico City, whether real or fabricated, played a crucial role in shaping public perception of the assassination.
It's mind-boggling to think about the level of planning and manipulation
It is.
that would have been involved in orchestrating something like that.
Right.
But if this theory is true, it paints a very dark picture of the forces at play behind the scenes.
It certainly does. And it highlights the importance of questioning the official narrative and digging deeper to uncover the truth, however unsettling it might be.
All right, so let's pause and take a look at what we've explored so far.
Okay.
We started with Laura Kittrell's encounters with Oswald and his imposter. Then we uncovered those strange connections to Jack Ruby's world.
Yeah.
And now we've touched on the mystery surrounding Oswald's trip to Mexico City. It's a lot to process.
It is.
And I'm sure you're feeling the weight of all these details and possibilities.
You're right. It can be overwhelming to confront such a complex and controversial event.
Right.
But it's important to remember
What's that?
that these are just pieces of a much larger puzzle.
And even though we may never have definitive answers, the process of piecing these fragments together, examining the evidence and weighing the different perspectives can help us get closer to a more complete understanding of what happened that day in Dallas.
And in the case of the JFK assassination, I believe it's our duty to keep asking questions, to keep searching for the truth, no matter how elusive it might be.
Well said. And with that in mind, let's move on to another layer of this fascinating deep dive.
Okay.
We've explored Oswald's potential connection to intelligence agencies.
Right.
But what about the other players in this story? What about the people in his inner circle, those closest to him?
Okay.
Could they provide any further insights?
That's an excellent point.
Point to his motivations and actions.
And one figure who's always fascinated researchers
Who's that?
Is Marina Oswald.
Right, Marina.
Lee Harvey Oswald's wife.
She was a Russian citizen who met and married Oswald.
Right, she was.
While he was living in the Soviet Union.
That's right.
But their relationship seems to have been quite complex, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And it's through Marina's story that we can start to understand the personal dynamics that might have influenced Oswald's actions.
Okay, so let's dive into Marina's world.
All right.
What can you tell us about her background and her relationship with Oswald?
Well, Marina Persikova, as she was known before her marriage, was born in the Soviet Union in 1941.
Okay.
She was a young woman when she met Oswald in Minsk in 1961.
Okay.
Oswald, as we know, had defected to the Soviet Union a couple of years earlier, and they married just a few months after meeting.
Wow, really?
Yes, in April 1961.
So this was during...
And it's worth noting that this was a time of great tension between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, the height of the Cold War.
Yeah.
So their marriage was bound to attract attention.
Yeah, it must have raised eyebrows on both sides of the Iron Curtain.
Oh, yeah.
A disillusioned American defector marrying a young Soviet woman?
Right.
What was their relationship like?
From what we can gather from Marina's own accounts and interviews, their relationship was tumultuous from the start.
Right.
There were cultural differences,
of course,
language barriers, and of course the constant scrutiny from both Soviet and American authorities.
And within a year, they decided to return to the United States.
Yes, in June 1962, they immigrated to the U.S. with their infant daughter, June Lee.
Okay.
And this move, I think, is where things started to get really complicated for Oswald.
In what way?
Well, he was returning to a country that he had renounced just a few years earlier.
Right.
He was viewed with suspicion by many.
Yeah, of course.
And he struggled to find his place in American society.
And how did Marina adapt to life in the U.S.?
It was a difficult adjustment for her as well.
Yeah, I imagine.
She was a young mother in a foreign country, trying to learn a new language and navigate a culture that was vastly different from her own.
It sounds like a recipe for tension and conflict.
Yeah.
And we know that they lived apart for some periods.
That's right.
With Marina and the children staying with Ruth Payne, while Oswald lived and worked in Dallas.
Exactly. And it's during this period, in the months leading up to the assassination, that Marina starts to notice some changes in Oswald's behavior.
What kind of changes?
Well, she describes him becoming increasingly withdrawn and secretive. He was spending more and more time alone reading political pamphlets and listening to shortwave radio broadcasts.
That's interesting. It sounds like he was becoming more politically active.
Yeah.
Perhaps even radicalized.
It's possible. And Marina also noticed that he was becoming increasingly frustrated with his inability to find steady work and support his family.
So we have a portrait of a man who's disillusioned with both the Soviet Union and the United States, struggling to find his place in the world and becoming increasingly isolated and angry. It's a volatile mix.
It certainly is. And it's important to remember that we're seeing all of this through the lens of Marina's perspective.
Right.
She was the one closest to Oswald during this tumultuous period, and her insights are invaluable in understanding his state of mind.
But what about Marina herself?
Okay.
What were her own political leanings?
Right.
Did she share Oswald's views?
That's a complex question, and one that historians continue to debate. Marina has always maintained that she wasn't particularly interested in politics, and that she didn't share her husband's radical views.
But some have suggested that she might have been more involved than she let on.
Right.
Perhaps even playing a role in Oswald's activities.
There have been theories and speculations, yes.
Right.
But it's important to remember that Marina has always denied any involvement in the assassination. And there's no concrete evidence to suggest otherwise.
Okay, so we had this complex and often contradictory portrait of Marina Oswald.
Yes.
A young woman caught in the crosshairs of history.
Yeah.
Married to a man who would become one of the most infamous figures of the 20th century.
Right.
Her story, like her husband's, is full of unanswered questions.
Exactly. And I think it's important to approach her story
with both empathy and a critical eye.
Okay.
We need to understand her experiences and perspectives. Right. While also recognizing the limitations of her memories and the potential for bias.
It's a reminder that history is often told from multiple perspectives.
Yes.
And that there's rarely a single definitive truth, especially when dealing with events as complex and controversial as the JFK assassination.
Well said.
What?
And as we continue to explore the various threads of this deep dive, it's essential to keep that in mind.
Right.
We need to consider all angles, all possibilities, and all perspectives.
Yeah.
If we want to come closer to understanding the truth of what happened on that fateful day in Dallas.
Yeah, it's fascinating how these personal stories, like Marina's, add another dimension to this whole thing. It's not just about, political intrigue and conspiracy theories. It's about real people caught in the middle of something they couldn't control. Absolutely. And when we weave those personal narratives together with the historical context, the political tensions, the social dynamics of the time, it creates a much richer, more nuanced understanding of the events leading up to the assassination.
As we've been going through these documents and piecing together these fragments of information about Oswald, the Employment Office encounters the Carousel Club connections, the Mexico City trip. It almost feels like we're watching a play unfold.
A play. That's an interesting analogy. How?
Well, we have this cast of characters, each with their own motivations and roles to play. We have a setting, Dallas, in the early 1960s, with its political climate and underworld figures. And of course, we have a plot, this series of events that culminates in a tragic and shocking climax.
I see what you mean. And in this play, Oswald seems to be at the center of it all.
Right.
But is he the lead actor? Or is he just a bit player caught up in something much bigger?
Exactly. And that's the question that continues to fascinate frustrate researchers. Was Oswald a mastermind? A pawn, or somewhere in between?
It's like we're trying to figure out his lines, his true intentions. But the script is full of missing pages and cryptic notes.
And the other characters. The ones surrounding Oswald. They're just as enigmatic.
They are.
Take Crayford the imposter. What was his real purpose? Was he just testing his acting skills? Or was he part of a more sinister plan?
And then there's Ruby. The nightclub owner who silenced Oswald forever. What was his connection to all of this? Was it a spontaneous act of revenge? Or was he playing a predetermined role in a larger drama?
The motives, the connections, the sheer number of coincidences, they all swirl around Oswald like a vortex, pulling us deeper into this mystery.
It's like we're caught in a web of our own making, trying to untangle the threads of truth from the strands of speculation. And the more we pull, the tighter the web seems to become.
But even when faced with uncertainty, even when confronted with more questions than answers, I believe it's essential to keep searching, to keep examining the evidence, and to keep the dialogue alive.
Because the truth, however elusive, is worth pursuing.
It is.
And maybe, just maybe, by shining a light on these shadowy figures and events, we can illuminate a path towards a deeper understanding of the JFK assassination and its enduring legacy.
You've brought us a truly fascinating collection of sources today.
I try.
And this deep dive has taken us down some unexpected paths.
Yeah, it has.
We've explored the world of Lee Harvey Oswald in those crucial weeks leading up to the assassination, uncovering a bizarre story of mistaken identities, shadowy connections, and lingering questions
that continue to intrigue us decades later.
We met Laura Kittrell, an unwitting witness to history, whose encounters with both Oswald and his imposter offer a unique glimpse into the events of that time.
They do.
We trace the threads linking Oswald to Jack Ruby's Carousel Club, a world of intrigue and potential motives that continue to fascinate researchers to this day.
Absolutely.
And we delved into the murky waters of Oswald's alleged trip to Mexico City, a journey shrouded in mystery and conflicting accounts that raise more questions than they answer.
As we conclude this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought. If, as our sources suggest, Curtis Crawford was indeed testing his ability to impersonate Lee Harvey Oswald, what was the intended purpose?
What was the point?
Was there a larger plan in motion?
Okay.
A scheme to frame Oswald as the patsy? To manipulate events towards a predetermined outcome? Or was it something far simpler?
Yeah.
A bizarre twist of fate.
Okay.
That has fueled decades of speculation and conspiracy theories.
These questions, while unanswered in the material you provided, are definitely worth pondering.
They are.
And as you continue to explore this complex and tragic event, remember the importance of considering multiple perspectives.
Yes.
Seeking out diverse voices.
Right.
And challenging the official narrative.
Absolutely.
The truth, however elusive, is out there waiting to be discovered.